Good afternoon. This is the Food Enthusiast. I'm Dara Bunjon, and if this is the first time tuning into the show, I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Just ecstatic today. I have a great guest for you, the doyenne of Southern food, the Grande Dame of Southern cooking, 300 episodes of cooking segments that she has filmed over her lifetime. The most amazing person in cooking today, Nathalie Dupree. Let's bring Nathalie on.
Hello there, Miss Dara.
Hello.
I miss seeing you.
Well, here I am in all my glory.
Yes.
I wanted to do I was looking up what's a nice Southern intro, and I went, "How you all doing?"
We'd be good.
So what's on your plate today? What's going on in Charleston?
Well, Jack has been doing a lot of interviews lately. My husband has for some of his books, and I came out with the book last fall. Just a collection of stories about food and relationships, which is one of those things that I love to write about. And then mostly I'm cooking for two, which I have to say is a miserable way to live. I don't know. There's only one thing worse than cooking for two, and that's cooking for one. I think that's really harder.
Well, I think cooking for one, you just go with whatever your mood is. I mean, I've been known to eat the same thing night after night because I cooked it and it's easy.
That's right. That's true. But men are they don't do that.
Well, let me ask you,
look pitiful.
Does Jack do any cooking whatsoever?
Yes, on Saturdays. I told him at some point that I didn't do Saturday lunch, that enough was enough. And so he does Saturday lunch, and we do grilled peanut butter and banana sandwiches.
It's the same thing every Saturday lunch. Is that the only thing he knows how to make?
Yes. And he, sometimes I can sort of walk him through a grilled cheese and apple sandwich. But he has a waffle iron that he inherited from his first wife. I didn't know for sure where he got it, but it turns out his first wife. And because we Zoomed together with the children, and it came up. And so he does it on the waffle iron. It's Elvis Presley's favorite sandwich. So,
may he rest.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest. Yeah. There's so much we can talk about. I have 2 pages of notes, and I'm going, where do I start? And you know what? I'm going to start on what I thought was fascinating. First of all, your second husband, which you call your favorite husband.
My favorite former husband.
Favorite former husband, David Dupree. Right. Had work that took him to London, and when you were in London, you went to the Cordon Bleu and took course. And there was something, you were the only American. There was some story between you and Julia Child. Why didn't you fill people in?
Well, the first time I went, it was just a demonstration, and I came home to the furnished flat, and I couldn't cook anything. And so I went back and signed up, and then I signed up for sequential courses and received my advanced certificate. And our exam day, Julia Child showed up. I had never heard of her because I had been living in London. And before that, I don't even know if I had a TV. And so Julia was the House American, and I went up to her after they introduced me. I was the only American, so they showed her my dish, which I remember vividly was a hollowed out turkey. It was a turkey that was stuffed with a tongue mousseline force meat, and I had a homemade aspic, turkey aspic. It was delicious. And that was my presentation dish. And she was very impressed. Um, and so then afterwards, I went up to her and Paul on the street. I just said, "What should I do with the rest of my life?" And
The small question, teeny question.
this person that I never heard of, never seen on television, knew really very little about. And I go up and say, "What should I do with the rest of my life?" And she said, "Well, we need cooking schools. We need cooking teachers in America." So I said, "Oh, okay." So that I always had that in the back of my mind that that's what I would do. And
But you
yeah,
No, but you
go
didn't
on.
go directly in that because you and David moved to Mallorca,
Right.
and
Uh,
and
he he we went there because we had to wait out a tax situation, and London was too expensive to live in while he wasn't working, and I wasn't working. So we moved to Majorca, and somebody offered me a job cooking in a restaurant, just
but
like
you
that.
hadn't seen a restaurant.
You know, we're talking a long time ago, and I had never been in a restaurant kitchen, never in my whole life. Our cooking teacher had told us to try to go into kitchens and look at them when we could, when we were in restaurants, just to see. So I had sort of done that. But so the night before I became chef, I asked an American woman who uh, owned the restaurant and worked in the front of the house in Majorca and Palma if I could stand in the kitchen and watch the chef and who was working alone in the kitchen. And she said yes. So that's what I did.
Well, you're fearless because a lot of things, almost everything you've done, you didn't have any training for. You just jumped in and went for it.
Well, I didn't know what I didn't know. That's a great blessing. I suppose if I had worked in restaurants, I would have known that I wasn't capable. But not not having worked in a restaurant, there not being jobs for women in restaurants. Good restaurants, when I was coming up, hired men as waiters too. There weren't many women that were waitresses. My friend worked in a Figaro in the village, the coffee house. And at one point, I worked in a coffee house in Boston for maybe a month or two one summer. But that was it. And they didn't really have kitchens. You just served brie and tea.
Which, we were starting off early. I think somewhere in my notes that we were talking about cooking for two is a pain, but you wouldn't mind cooking for 12. You would love to do that.
No, I'd much rather cook for 12. I mean, 12 is so easy. You can just throw a roast in. Cooking for two, you have to do some kind of a saute or broil or grill or something. You don't get to handle a nice piece of meat or even a nice big quantity of vegetables. I enjoy
Right.
cooking vegetables. Yeah.
It's funny you said about the meat. My comfortable number is 6 people. And I've probably talked about this before. I buy prime rib when it's on sale on the holidays. I do the
Right.
same I do the same dinner. I just rotate the guests. Maybe the appetizers and the dinner are slightly different, but there's nothing like that. It's just fabulous to do that and people enjoy it. And rather than cooking, somebody doesn't eat this, that, or the other, I go, how would you like to come over for a prime rib dinner? Not,
Right.
would you like to come over for dinner? And they sit there and go, I can't eat this, I can't eat that.
Right.
Um,
How you invite people is really important. Uh, and I think you've hit on something there. You need to be explicit to tell people exactly what you're offering and what they can expect, and then they can tell you if they're not gonna like it or just not come.
Right.
or say.
It works. We had somebody said, I haven't had red meat in 2 years, but I'm still coming. It's fine. That's fine with
Yeah,
me.
right, right,
But
right.
cooking classes, there's a lot of time that went from Mallorca. Um, you did your restaurant in Georgia when you
Social
came
Circle,
back,
midway between
right?
Social Circle and Covington. Hmm.
And what people don't realize, and I was listening to an audio that you did that was about an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh,
Uh,
where was that?
Two girls, and I think it was done fairly recently, and they were in your
Yes,
home, and you were 6 feet apart.
yes,
And one of the things was, in order to get that restaurant off the ground that you had in Georgia, that you had a newspaper route.
I did. The banker wouldn't loan us the money for the restaurant. My favorite former husband wanted an antique shop, and the property was the property that we leased from his stepmother, um, and and we converted it. It was an old machine shop warehouse, and we converted it into an antique shop. And the bank was perfectly willing to loan us money for that, but they did not want to touch anything for the restaurant. So my dear brother and my favorite former husband constructed the restaurant, and I ran the largest paper route in Covington, Georgia, uh, to earn money to open the restaurant to pay for all the things I needed.
You probably
So
have
why
to
not?
do a route that covers the whole state of Georgia nowadays to pay for something. Yeah, the newspapers are definitely in a bind, but luckily some of them are going, they're online and people are adapting to that. But people, there's something about having the feel of that newspaper. You
We
tend to
still
miss
get two
that.
a day. But I can roll a newspaper and put it in a black bag and throw it with one hand.
Where are you throwing it? Oh, from the okay,
Throw it on
from
someone's porch
right. Okay.
or
Sorry,
piazza.
my senior moment. It better piazza. Um, so eventually, I'm just going to give people sort of a time frame. I think we're in the 70s at this point. Um, and there was a point where Rich's department store had you come in and do cooking classes.
Right.
And that was in Atlanta. And you did
That's
that
right.
for about 10 years. I'm trying to keep this chronological.
Right.
And he came back to what Julia said, we need cooking classes. And what you might not know about me is back in the 80s, I ran cooking classes here in Baltimore in the restaurant kitchens, and there were no cooking classes to be had. But your classes were what I call hands on. Mine were
Yes.
demonstration.
I did both. I did both. We had something called Lunch and Learn where I did a demonstration and people came and ate a lunch. So I did both. And then uh, before I did a class, like a weekend class, I would do a demonstration and then everybody would do the same thing that I did.
Well,
So,
I met some people. There was a French woman who did a class in the church kitchen, and we would pick a recipe and break out into teams, and that got me started. The
isn't that wonderful?
it is, and there's something about breaking bread with people and working as a team and having the fruits of your labor to sit down and enjoy. To me, there's
Yeah,
nothing more special than
right.
sitting around a table, enjoying a meal and good conversation. I grew up with that.
And Julia always said, if you can just take from someone who knows one thing you don't know, you it's worth taking the class. So,
Didn't you
uh,
just take a class at something George? What was it? Or
yes,
recently, Zero
it's
George?
called Zero George. Oh, it was fascinating. I learned how to strip an eel.
Well, that was something
Not that
new.
I could do it, not that I want to do it, but I could take the skin off of an eel, if you asked me.
Well, I'll keep that in mind. The next time I need an eel skin, I'll give you a call.
Well, you used to have to go to France to learn how to do something like that. You know, they didn't do it in American cooking schools, certainly not in mine.
Well, before COVID, in the past couple of years, there's been an uptick of cooking classes and hands-on here in Baltimore. I'm assuming that you're seeing the same down in Charleston and where you go, uh, and more hands-on rather than demonstration, the people putting their hands into things.
People really do want to touch food. I uh, it, it happened that property sold, a lot of property sold that housed our cooking schools, and so we actually don't have a good cooking school in downtown Charleston or in adjacent Mount Pleasant right now. But uh, but I think as soon as COVID is over, we're going to be able to find spaces again because people keep talking to me about doing it, and I'm going to do a class online for the junior league. I can't imagine what that's going to be like.
Well, you're going to have to learn how to work your ring light, won't you?
Yeah, I'm hoping they will. Well,
Yeah.
there's a problem because the ring light plugs into the computer, into the phone, and but so do my earplugs. So I'm just not
There,
the
there,
woman I want to be.
okay, I'm sure there's an adaptation. You have been a catalyst for many organizations that promote women, that promote cooking. And the first time I met you in person, I was like gobsmacked. I was with Ann Wilder, and it was a La
Oh, I love
Dame's
Anne.
event in Washington, D.C. And it was you, it was Ann, and it was Ann Willen. And I'm like, and anybody doesn't know who Ann Willen, she was head of La Varenne Cooking School in France. I'm like, my mouth was open. I just couldn't believe I had all these great people in front of me. And it was a great organization, La Dame Escoffier, and they've appointed you as a Grande Dame. And
Yes,
then let's see, IACP, which is the International Association of Culinary Professionals, and that started to pull together cooking school teachers. That's what it initially started as, but it
that's
did
right.
grow.
It did. Uh, there, there were two major issues when we started. I guess uh, a lot of the men owned the cooking school, owned the facility or the cookware shop, and the women were mostly teachers. Like I didn't own Rich's department store. I just ran the cooking school, so I was pretty insistent that it should be for cooking teachers as well as cooking schools, and that we should all get a vote. And so it still has a large membership, and we are meeting in a couple of next week, I guess, by Zoom, and it's free for anyone that's a member. So I do encourage people to join and then watch Zoom because we're going to tell stories, and we're also going to have cooking classes. Of course, Jock is going to cook, and some of the other luminaries are going to cook.
Right. Just to let people know, ICP is cooking professionals. It is no longer just cooking schools. It is food photographers, food styling, food writers. They're all segments. And I've been to a number of the conferences, love them. And when we had it in Baltimore, I thought I'd lose my mind. I co-chaired the opening event, the
Yes,
big
I remember.
fundraiser. And no, I didn't have much color left in my face after that. And plus, we did the trade show and things like that. But it was like I learned from it. Maybe I didn't know how to do it
Yes.
beforehand, but I can now do a major conference.
That's
Not
right.
that I
And
want to.
that's a terrific skill, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah,
wonderful to learn how to arrange that. Yeah.
yes, it is. But in my time of life, the less stress I have, the better. I don't need any more lines from worry. So let's tell people how you came to being on PBS. It was through Riches, through White Lily Flour.
Well,
It,
actually, it was a little more complicated than that. I was doing a local CBS show called that was on every night, and I just had like a 2-minute segment on that, and I had done that, so I had a little bit of experience. But White Lily would drop by the advertising
Riches.
person would
Oh,
drop
okay.
by White Lily, would drop by Riches. White Lily Flour would drop by Riches periodically and see me and see if I needed any flour or had any questions. And of course, I had written the first article on using Southern flour and that this was unique. And so they suggested that I do a television show. And in the meantime, Rich's closed the cooking school after 10 years. It was had run its course. And so White Lily wanted me to do a television show and had the money, offered me the money to underwrite it. But of course, I didn't want to compete with Julia. I know. I mean, Uh, well, I didn't think I could do as good a job as Julia. I didn't. My mother never brought me up to be on television. They didn't even have television when I was born. So anyway, I asked several people to produce it, and um, they weren't they weren't interested. They didn't want to lower themselves to do it, I guess. So I finally found this young woman in her 20s, Cynthia Graubart, and she produced it. And uh, she and I became very close. We've written several cookbooks together, and she has now produced. In fact, she just produced a few videos for White Lily with Virginia Willis in them on the White Lily Facebook or Instagram pages, I guess it is. So she's still doing
Right.
some of that as well as doing cookbooks. But, once again, I didn't know anyone that was, except for Julia, that was doing television, and I didn't know anything about how to do it. So I called Martin Yan because I knew him from IACP, and I asked him how to do a television show. And he wrote me a 3-page letter on how to do a television show. I wish I still had it.
Well, it's interesting. My friend Margaret Sullivan, may she rest in peace, was a producer for Jacques, for Pierre Frenet, for Stephen Reichlin, and Jacques Torres. And I learned the ins and outs just because you have to have the funding. Back in your day, it was 250,000. You have to bring the underwriters to PBS for your show. And now
That's
it's
right.
easily $1 million or $1.5 million to produce maybe 12 shows.
But it doesn't need to be. It's just, well, that's another story. But you're right. You do have to raise the money for it, and it's much more expensive than it used to be. It's very, very unusual now that you could just walk in and say, "Oh, someone contacted me, and they have a couple of $100,000 and they want to have a cooking show." I mean, the station was
That,
just open mouthed.
yeah. You mentioned Virginia Willis, and you helped mentor her, and she's, what's it, something you all in her cookbooks. And I watched her make the biscuits. Now
Right.
you have a biscuit book that you did. What
That's
is
right.
the secret to making a good biscuit?
Well, now you're hitting a touchy subject. It's very touchy because we don't
Okay.
make biscuits the same way. She makes her biscuits the way her mother and her grandmother do. And I don't discuss the way that she makes her biscuits because we're not the same. I make mine with a different hand motion, and I like to put mine close together on a baking sheet where she separates hers. And I like a small baking sheet, and she likes the larger one. I like a round, if I can get it, a cake pan or even a pizza pan, a little one. And I like to do them in batches. So we do different. But the main trick is to have a light flour, a southern flour, one that one that clings together. Gluten is so interesting, and if you have a bread flour, the gluten strands stretch more. If you have a soft wheat flour, a southern flour, they don't stretch as much. So you don't want to handle them hardly at all, just enough to get them to start growing. And excuse me, and you want, uh, and because of that, the flour sort of clings together without any liquid in it. So it makes it much easier to make a biscuit. My favorite is 2 ingredient biscuits. I use twice as much self rising southern flour, which means it has the additives in it, as heavy whipping cream. And you don't need any butter. So that makes
Oh,
it easier to practice with. And I use those flexible cutting boards like we used to give people in cooking class that you can buy 2 or 3 for $1 sometimes now in the grocery store anyway, or the dollar store probably. Anyway, I just mix the uh,
buttermilk.
heavy cream. No, not even buttermilk.
What's
Heavy
heavy
cream
cream?
and self-rising flour. Twice as much self-rising flour as heavy cream. I just mix it together quickly till I've got clumps, and then I dump it onto one of those plastic cooking sheets, and then I just fold it up like that and pat it out, and then fold it again and pat it out, and then fold it again and pat it out, and then cut it into little
Biscuit.
biscuits and bake the biscuits on a small pan. I use my toaster oven or my Breville, which I guess is more than a toaster oven, but a countertop oven most often because I don't want to heat the kitchen. And I turn the biscuit halfway. I use high heat, um, and cook them for 10 to 12 minutes, turning them halfway. And then I put butter on them, and they're delicious. So I recommend people start with that twice as much self-rising flour as heavy cream. Then if you want to learn how to incorporate the butter, that's something again. But the first thing is to learn to do the folding and the cutting so that it gets you started. But I have another trick. This is important. This is the most
Do
important
tell.
thing you'll ever learn. Okay,
I'm
when
listening.
you get home and you get to your new stove, when you get your stove, you want to take a whatever you're going to bake in, a baking sheet, or in my case, several baking pans if you wanted to, but take a baking sheet. Always have enough room for the air to circulate around it, and spread it with white bread, like Wonder Bread,
Okay.
and make toast. However you make toast, 450, 350, whatever the temperature you consistently use in your oven would be. So, and then you, after you've made your toast, you take it out of the oven and you take a photograph of it because it has a pattern that comes from being in the oven, and it will tell you the pattern. Then you turn it over and you look at the bottom side. And if the bottom side is darker than the top side, either to raise it a rack in the oven or put two pans the same size so that it doesn't brown more on the bottom than on the top. And you take a picture of the bottom too. And you print those out. And then whenever you bake a cake or a pie or something like that, you have it right inside your cabinet. And you can look to see where you need to move your cake. So if it's browning too fast on the bottom, or if it's browning too fast, you can
In
move
the
it
back.
away. Yeah. If it's not browning enough and you want it browner, then you can move it to, for my case, it's just a center bar that browns things. So it helps you learn how to bake and bake evenly. That's my
That's
valuable
great.
tip.
Well, you have many of them, and a lot of them can be found in Nathalie Dupree's favorite stories and recipes. And I'm getting carried away. I should be people tuning in. We are here with the Grande Dame of Southern Cooking, Nathalie Dupree. You can find out anything, contact her, and it's very simple. Her webpage is nataliedupree.com. You can check out her videos on YouTube and Vimeo, and those links will be floated up in the notes for the show. And again, the latest book is Nathalie Dupree's Favorite Stories and Recipes. There are, like, what was it? There was some TV show about New York. They said there's a million stories.
Yeah.
I believe that you have the million stories.
I do have a lot of stories.
I'm just looking to tell people 3 James Beard Awards, The Who's Who in American Cooking by James Beard. Are you still involved with James Beard? As I know a ways back that you were involved in looking over the cookbooks that were being nominated for awards. Is that something you're still involved
Well,
with?
I haven't done the cookbooks there. I did the cookbooks for IACP, or maybe I did for 1 year for James Beard, but I did do a lot of the television and radio judging on the committee for James Beard. But after a certain number of years, you have to get off of that. And I haven't gotten back on because of COVID, but I'm hoping I'll get some other task soon. I still am on a committee for IACP where we choose the cookbooks that we think are going to last, that people will turn to in years to come, and that is wonderful. For instance, uh, with Anne Willens, it's her Grand Diplôme series, which were adapted from the London Cordon Bleu that we both went to. So those kinds of things, and that's a lot of fun. I love that committee because we get to learn about other books that influenced people all along. There's a list of
Right.
them on the IACP website, I think.
Well, yeah, I want to come back to something. I want to let you know when you came to the wine and food show in Washington and did a demo when Sarah Moulton did the show. I came
Right.
home with your flexible cutting board, so I still have that. So if you're wondering
Oh,
where
do
it
you?
went,
Well,
that
I
was
got
another trip.
started using those. I got started
Uh,
using those because my husband's niece, that we're very fond of, is Orthodox. Actually, she's a Lubavitcher. And so there are lots of rules, lots of dietary rules, uh, if you're Orthodox Jewish or if you're a Lubavitcher. I think they even feel that they go to a higher standard. And so I have a, um, a kosher plastic board that says, it belongs to Hyacera. It says Hyacera's cutting board, do not touch. And it's a plastic one. So those plastic ones are just wonderful if you're worried about dietary concerns for the people in your home.
Yeah,
Keep everything straight.
I'm looking over notes. Quote that you had: "Smart chefs eat local foods."
Absolutely. I mean, the best food is really the food that you've just picked. We all know that. Everyone knows that. And so, of course, you have to learn, your palate has to learn how the food, the local food tastes before you can embroider on it. Um, that was something that I learned when I first moved to Majorca, was that I had to know how their food tasted. Fortunately, we grew a lot of our own food on the finca, and the tomatoes were different. We hung the tomatoes. We wrapped them with cord, and we hung them in the hallway to keep them cool, and so they wouldn't butt up against each other. And they kind of dehydrated a little bit. I can't explain it to this day. Um, but anyway, they were a richer kind of a tomato. So did I say tomatoes? Yeah, the tomatoes that
Yes.
we grew. Yeah. And so everything locally is different. And it influences tremendously what you're able to cook. Water, uh, the taste of water really makes a big difference in what you cook too. And I think we forget that.
Well, it was interesting. I wrapped up something, it was a little bit different, but there's somebody was packaging saltwater and selling that from one of the
Really?
fancy food shows or something like that, right? And it had a little nozzle on it, and I still had some. So your pasta water, it had minerals in it. So you would use that for your pasta water. But I
Well,
can't remember how many years ago I got it at the fancy food show. But with the move, I'm clearing everything out of the cupboards and using them.
right. Well, we use beach water for our grits.
Oh,
Everybody always says beach water does better for their grits. And some people say beach water is the water from going out to the dock. And other people say that beach water is the kind of water that comes through the spigots that's kind of got a little aftertaste, uh, like an,
so which one is your beach water?
well, my beach water is what comes through the tap. I'm a lazy
Okay.
slug. Yeah. But if you catch your own shrimp, then you would naturally have beach water. And and that would be the water that you would freeze the shrimp in if you were going to freeze it.
Well, I'm going a little bit longer, and we could probably talk for eternity, and we'll do this again sometime. You got some
I'd
more
love
things
that.
to promote. Yeah, we always have a good time. No, 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 no. I have two questions I ask at the end of the show, and I know there's probably multiple answers to this one, maybe not
Okay.
as many as me. Um, what was your epic culinary fail?
Oh, I've had so many. I burned something just the other day. I have a new stove and I hate it. I hate the stove top because it just is so fast. And so my epic fail. Um,
Maybe
Gosh.
something funny.
Well, I do. One time, my caramel burned on when I was taping, and I didn't realize that it was on. And we had this poor cameraman that was up in a ladder with the camera, holding the camera that was going down. And I nearly asphyxiated him. The smoke started and the fire alarm went off. And so I suppose that's the one that people remember the most.
Remember.
But I have made a fool of myself many times in many places. So,
And that has nothing to do with cooking. No, I'm just kidding.
well, that's true too.
And my last question
Yes.
is, what didn't I ask you that I should have?
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that you should have asked me. I'm
Or
so
anything
glad you
else that
didn't ask me my favorite cookbook because I don't have one. They're like my children, and every one I write is a little different, and yet all of them have the things that I think are the basics. You said yours is a rib roast. I think everybody should learn how to do a beef tenderloin because that is the easiest meat to cook for a crowd for 10 to 12 people. And in the long run, it turns out to be pretty inexpensive because it serves so
feeds
many
enough.
people. Yeah. But I also think that everybody has to learn how to cut up a chicken. And so that's in every single cookbook as well. Because you shouldn't buy parts. That's my great uh,
Peeve.
mantra. You shouldn't buy chicken parts because when you buy chicken parts, you know, you can have two parts in the same package and then they've never seen each other. You know, I mean, you get two legs and the legs aren't from the same size chicken, or breast and a leg, and the leg is from something that's 5 pounds and the breast is something from 3 pounds, or vice
And the
versa.
giblets are from a
So,
totally other chicken.
and the
Yeah.
giblets have never, yeah. So those parts have never seen each other when they go in the package. So if you're going to fry chicken, you have to cut up your own chicken, and always try to cut up your own chicken. If you buy parts, understand that they've never seen each other before.
Yeah, you said fried
So,
chicken. For some reason, I flipped back to the Atlanta Women Chef and Restaurateurs Conference
oh
where
yes,
you were there, and
right.
the centerpieces were cakes. I think they were all might have been Nancy McDermott's cakes were the
Nancy McDermott.
centerpieces.
Yes,
Love
yes,
her,
right.
love her. And
Oh,
the fried chicken was Scott Peacock, I think.
that's right. That's right.
People
Yes.
people were they were putting it in their purse to go home. It was the best fried chicken. It was the best conference for food.
Well, you want to do an
Now,
interview with Scott Peacock. Now, he makes biscuits yet again a different way.
well,
So,
I will reach out to him. We're
yeah,
friends on Facebook, and he has an
right.
interesting story with Edna Lewis.
Oh, yes, he does. And a wonderful cookbook. And I think he's doing biscuit classes now. He One time he was at the Beard House, or at the after the Beard Awards, and he was making biscuits. And I asked if I could help. And I said, I know how to make biscuits, and he wouldn't let me help. So I suspect he's got some tricks that he thinks are very important that I would not have been obedient to. We all have our own little quirks
What
with biscuits.
with biscuits and how to do it.
That's right.
Nathalie, you're a joy.
You are a
And there's
joy to
no,
me. I'm so glad to see you again.
thank you. I'm going to give you a big mwah, and I'm just going to
You
finish up with
too.
some notes. Stay healthy, stay safe,
You too.
please. You're a treasure. Okay, everyone. Uh, I could have gone on and talked to Nathalie forever, which I was already doing. She's fascinating. Let me say that next week our guest is going to be Chef Ben Lenenfeld of La Cachera. We're going to talk tapas. We're going to talk Spanish food. We're going to talk about home meals that they're doing. Probably the best happy hour. They're even doing outdoor tables. Was the best happy hour here in town in Baltimore. Could not be missed. So tune in next week. As always, we love it when you share the show and help expand the audience. And how can you not enjoy listening to Nathalie Dupree? So if you want to find the show, it'll be up on JMore's Facebook page. It'll be up on jmoreliving.com. It'll be up on the YouTube channel, The Food Enthusiast. Always, always remain safe. wear your mask. And before I forget about it, if you need to reach me, food@jmoreliving.com. My social media is @Dara Cooks. May your plates always, always remain full. Have a very good week, and thank you for tuning in.